Let's jump right in. We're looking at a story today that is honestly nothing short of mythic. Albert Einstein. He's the ultimate example of human ambition wrestling with moral conscience. We're talking about a guy whose mind literally reshaped our understanding of reality, right? Yet his life was deeply entangled with the absolute darkest geopolitical chapters of the 20th century. In this explainer, we're going to trace what I like to call his Promethean arc, how he essentially brought the fire of the gods down to humanity and wow, the immense price that came with it.
So, how exactly did a failed academic just sitting at a desk in a Swiss patent office manage to unlock the universe and, well, accidentally birth the atomic age? You know, as an engineer myself, I've always found this paradox just completely fascinating. We are looking at a man who totally bypassed the traditional academic route, yet somehow he completely rewired human history and modern technology.
Okay, here's how we're going to break this down today. First up, the rebel patent clerk. Then, 1905, the miracle year. After that, gravity, fame, and pacifism. Then we'll cover fleeing the fascist threat. And finally, wrap up with the atomic moral conscience.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the rebel patent clerk.
To really get Einstein, we got to look at his roots. Born in Germany, his youth was kind of dictated by his family's struggling electrical engineering business. They actually had to bounce around from Germany to northern Italy and eventually Switzerland. And man, from the very beginning, he had this fierce, rebellious streak. At his school in Munich, he absolutely hated the strict, militaristic rote learning. I mean, he hated it so much he actually dropped out. But don't get it twisted. He wasn't a bad student. He was just a self-directed genius. Literally by age 14, he had independently mastered complex calculus and was casually reading incredibly dense philosophy like Kant, which completely baffled his tutors.
But, you know, he wasn't just some calculating machine. He was a highly complex human variable. Get this, to avoid German military service, he boldly renounced his citizenship, making himself stateless for years. He eventually married a brilliant Serbian physicist, Mileva Maric, and they had 3 kids. But here's the part that always gets me as an engineer. He actually couldn't land a university teaching job. No way, right? A friend had to help him snag a gig as an assistant examiner at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. So day in, day out, he's evaluating real-world electrical and mechanical patents. And honestly, this day job was exactly what he needed. It grounded his massive abstract brain in the practical, tangible mechanics of the physical world.
And that perfectly sets the stage for Section 2, 1905, the miracle year.
Okay, so while he's still working his day job at the patent office, Einstein publishes 4 distinct research papers. And we're talking about the leading physics journal of the time. In June, he drops the photoelectric effect, showing that light isn't just a continuous wave, but travels in discrete little energy packets or photons. Boom. Weeks later, July, his paper on Brownian motion definitively proves that atoms and molecules are actual physical things. Then, September, special relativity. And finally, November, mass-energy equivalence, proving that mass and energy are just 2 sides of the same coin. He showed that a tiny speck of mass can become a colossal amount of energy. Guys, in just 1 single year, this lone patent clerk literally shattered our entire understanding of the universe.
Now, special relativity can sound intimidating, but he used this beautifully simple thought experiment. Picture him riding a streetcar in Bern. He imagines this streetcar accelerating all the way up to the speed of light while he looks back at the city's clock tower. He figures, hey, if I hit the speed of light, the hands on that clock tower would look completely frozen to me. But the clock inside the streetcar with him, it's ticking normally. So his takeaway was that the speed of light is the universe's only absolute constant, which means time and motion are totally relative depending on who's observing them. Such a massive conceptual leap.
As an engineer, this is absolutely my favorite part, seeing how this high-level theoretical physics actually matters in the real world. You can map his 1905 abstract discovery straight to the tech we use every single day. The photoelectric effect, that's literally the foundational science behind the sensors that magically open automatic doors at the grocery store or solar-powered calculators. Special relativity, we absolutely have to account for it or the GPS on your phone would be completely useless. And that E equals mc squared paper, that mass energy equivalence is the bedrock principle behind how nuclear power plants generate all that electricity. Real, tangible game changers.
Moving right along, let's get into Section 3, gravity, fame, and pacifism.
So, as the scientific world slowly wakes up to what he did in 1905, Einstein finally gets welcomed into the academic elite and moves to Berlin. But we really need to draw a line between his 2 biggest theories here. We just talked about special relativity, that's 1905, dealing with the mechanics of light and constant speed. But general relativity, which he finalized a decade later in 1915, was an even wilder leap.
He went way beyond light to completely redefine gravity itself. He theorized that gravity isn't just some invisible magnetic pull, like Isaac Newton thought. Instead, it's the actual warping and curving of space and time by massive objects. Think of it like a heavy bowling ball sitting in the middle of a trampoline.
Now, right as he's finalizing general relativity, the First World War breaks out, and this is where we really see his unwavering moral compass. When dozens of top German scientists signed a manifesto supporting Germany's war effort, Einstein, who was a very vocal, lifelong pacifist, flat out refused to sign it. No way! Instead, he co-authored a counter-manifesto advocating for peace and a unified European culture. For him, war was basically a disease, something completely disconnected from the pure rationality of science.
Once the war ended, his fame just exploded. I mean, he became a massive global celebrity. In 1919, a solar eclipse perfectly confirmed his general relativity theory, and the papers went nuts, declaring he had overthrown Newton. By 1921, he bags the Nobel Prize. His personal life shifted quite a bit too. He divorced Mileva, married his cousin Elsa, and as they traveled, he became this huge cultural icon. He's rubbing shoulders in Hollywood with legends like Charlie Chaplin. He was getting mobbed by crowds exactly like a movie star.
But, as we know, that golden era didn't last. Let's look at Section 4, Fleeing the Fascist Threat.
While Einstein is out traveling the globe as this acclaimed genius, the political climate back home in Germany is taking a really dark turn. It escalated into a terrifying geopolitical threat. First, the 1929 Wall Street crash throws the whole world and a heavily indebted Germany into an economic depression. Out of that chaos, Hitler's anti-Semitic Nazi party rises to power, scapegoating Jews for all the nation's problems. By 1933, the Nazi state is fully established. They had actually raided Einstein's Berlin apartment twice just because he was Jewish. Seeing the writing on the wall, the greatest mind in the world handed in his German passport at an embassy, renounced his citizenship again, and fled across the Atlantic to safety at Princeton University.
And that brings us to the final and definitely the most tragic arc of our explainer. Section 5, The Atomic Moral Conscience.
So from the safety of Princeton, Einstein has to sit and watch his beautiful abstract equations turn into absolute nightmares. Right before World War II, physicists in Europe figured out nuclear fission using uranium. Basically, building an atomic bomb was now theoretically on the table. A Hungarian physicist, Leo Szilard, realized that the Nazis could absolutely force scientists to build this catastrophic weapon. So Szilard writes this urgent letter to US President Roosevelt to warn him, and Einstein puts his famous signature right on it. Think about how agonizing that must have been. You have a lifelong staunch pacifist urging the US to start what became the Manhattan Project purely out of the terrifying fear of a Nazi superweapon. The moral weight of that is just staggering.
I really want us to pause on this number for a second. 215,000 plus. That represents the estimated casualties, both from the initial blasts and the ensuing radiation sickness, when the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. Germany had already surrendered, but the weapons were used to abruptly end the war in the Pacific. It's a sobering reality.
As you can imagine, Einstein was left with just profound regret. He was absolutely sickened by the attacks, and he stated, "The time has come now when man must give up war. It is no longer rational to solve international problems by resorting to war." He carried this incredibly deep, lingering guilt, because ultimately his mass-energy equivalence equation, that elegant E=mc² from his miracle year, was the foundational physics that unleashed this unprecedented mass destruction.
So, for his final years, Einstein basically dedicated himself to finding some kind of post-war redemption. He fiercely advocated for international peace, total nuclear disarmament, and even pitched the idea of a global government to stop nation-states from constantly competing and fighting. He also supported the newly formed State of Israel, though he politely turned down an offer to be their ceremonial president. And academically, the guy never quit. Right up until he died in 1955, he was tirelessly chasing the unified field theory, one final massive attempt to unite gravity and electromagnetism into one single elegant framework to explain nature itself.
Which leaves us with a pretty heavy final thought. Albert Einstein pushed the boundaries of human knowledge further than anyone since Isaac Newton. But his life is the ultimate proof that science doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It's wielded by us, by humans. So as we keep unlocking the universe's ultimate secrets, whether that's artificial intelligence or genetic engineering, we really have to ask ourselves, are we actually responsible enough and morally mature enough to handle the power they bring? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks your curiosity to dive even deeper.